I'd like to welcome everybody to this latest webinar from the CLA South West on the future of land management, a panel discussion concerning the benefits of technology for rural business owners at a time of great change for the industry. Just some housekeeping. We are recording this webinar, so this will be available to view afterwards as well, and details of that will be distributed after the webinar. We do also encourage all attendees or any attendees to submit questions at any time using the Q&A function we have here on Zoom, and we will look to answer some of these questions towards the end of the session, time permitting. My name's Tom Mason. I'm a chartered surveyor down here in the CLA South West region, and I'm just going to give a quick introduction to the topic and then introduce you to our panel today. So as many of us know, the rural sector is embarking on probably one of the greatest transitions in a long time. Combination of the changing political landscape, post-Brexit agricultural transition, and the drive for sustainability, some of the driving forces behind these changes. Rural businesses across the country will want to be best placed in order to manage these changes, and new approaches to business management will be needed in many cases. Those who are able to adapt will be the ones who are most likely to be successful. And one of these key tools for businesses to adapt to change is technology. And as I said, we're very excited to bring together a really interesting panel today, who are involved in various areas of the industry and the PropTech element of it. We're going to discuss how technology will play a key role for farms and landowners going forwards. Our three speakers today we have Daniel Green, who is the owner of the Black Arrows, a specialist drone surveying company, undertaking a wide variety of drone imagery, as you'll see later on. We have Sholto Moga, who's the owner of Terra Nova Land Management and the founder of Searchlight, a Terrier software package geared for rural estate management. And we have Tim Hopkin, founder of the Land App, which is a mapping solution for land managers, and also founder of Land Management 2.0, a community interest company dedicated to transforming the future of land management. So if I could kindly bring in our panel of speakers. Afternoon, guys.
Hi there.
Hi.
Hello. Thank you very much for joining us today. We're very grateful and very excited to be hosting this. As I said, I think this is going to be a really interesting discussion. And I think the first point to kick off with, because I'm not sure whether everyone on the call will be particularly, au fait with the terms and kind of this sector of the industry. So what do we mean by PropTech when we're discussing this? Who would like to come in first? Sholto?
Yeah, why not? PropTech is, for us anyway, is technology solutions for dealing with property. I mean, effectively, it's to do the heavy lifting of a lot of the repeat administrative work that one needs to do. It's about collating data, and it's about turning it into useful information so that you can start to make decisions about your property. But it's effectively doing the repeat heavy lifting of data gathering, data movement, and data collation. That's the essence of it from our perspective.
And Daniel, how about you? And obviously, I know from your side of it, it's not a different approach to it, but you operate, I suppose, at the raw collection end of it. So what does PropTech mean to you?
That's right. I think, yeah, to echo Sholto's points, and as you say, we're getting up there in the air, capturing that raw information. So it's a case of having that knowledge that's actually quantifiable at the front end. So rather than just using, if you're going to use drones, rather than just taking photos, actually capturing data, whether it's 3D data or near infrared, multispectral, and actually having fact to make business decisions based on rather than conjecture. So very much the same is getting that knowledge and then having that to start with, so you can take it to platforms like these to actually convert that knowledge into applicable learnings that you can add to your business and how you operate.
Perfect, thank you. And Tim?
I think, well, for me, really, it's like the guys said, it's simplifying processes that are otherwise very complex. You know, there's such huge shifting tide in the land sector at the moment, and frankly, we don't have time to waste on excessive administration and costs. So I think for me, just wherever good technological processes can be put in place to simplify decision making, bring multiple parties onto the same page, highlight anomalies or issues. Yeah, it's all about de-risking businesses and hopefully opening up to more profitable business ventures. So it's anything that simplifies that process and makes life easy for people, essentially.
The only thing I would add to that, Tom, because I'm conscious that not everybody is familiar with the technology available and what it does, or may not even use it on a day-to-day basis. PropTech is going through quite a revolution because there is a step change. But it's no different from moving from a manual logbook for recording all your rents that they would have done in Dickensian times through to putting it on a spreadsheet. That is a technology revolution. You know, it's just a different tool. And the difference between what we are dealing with now and have available to us now is that it is, like I say, a step change in the speed and the efficiency of conducting those processes, but it is just another tool. That's what it's there for.
Perfect. Yeah, and I say certainly, I think that leads quite nicely into our kind of next question. And obviously, as I've said, you're all involved in PropTech in different capacities, and I've kind of given some introduction as to the changing landscape and everything that is going on at the time and facing the rural sector. So, from your positions, why do you feel it is so important? And say we've discussed, the change in processes as part of this, but say I would like to hear why you feel it's so important at this time that rural businesses are getting on top of this and considering new technology as part of their land management system. Tim, would you like to go first?
Yeah, happy to start. I mean, one thing that I consistently hear, so doing the Land Management 2.0 webinars and the interviews that I've been doing, this is a question that I ask all the time, like, you know, why is it now? And it's never been clearer that now is the time to get the house in order, to really know what you have and what you don't have, know what the opportunities are and what they're not, know where the risks are and where they're not. And I think for me, the reason that now is such an important time is no one ever wants to waste time, money, or energy. So now's the time to really kind of get the house in order, I guess, to some degree, and just do that baseline appraisal, really get crystal clear on what your opportunities are, and then know that that's where you can invest your finite resources. So I think because BPS is disappearing, we don't know what Elms is going to look like, the natural capital market is forming, there's not the wiggle room in the market now probably to leave it another year or two. And I think maybe where PropTech is really valuable is that, you know, it does allow you to kind of own a lot of that IP in-house. So you really have your fingers on the data from which you can engage your consultants and have really pragmatic, productive conversations rather than working off concepts and sort of ideology. So I think that's, again, for me, like now is the time to get that really crystal clear baseline of what you've got. And then you're going to be able to pragmatically invest in where your future actually is, dependent on your context. So that's why I'd say now is the time.
No, certainly agree. Daniel, how about you? I say again, from your perspective, I say why do you think this is such an important thing to be for landowners and businesses to be considering at this time, and your experience working with various estates and landowners and what they've been asking of you?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think, well, drones, I think everyone's pretty familiar now, whether it's just seeing mentioned normally in the negative in the news, or whether it's you or your nephew or niece has got a drone for Christmas. It's, you know, people are very aware of them, and I think it's mainly driven from obviously the military applications, but now on the consumer side that has driven the technology very, very fast, and meant that, you know, drone technology has been around now for a good number of years, and the technology has now established itself, you know, with very, very safe sensors, very, very safe motors, safe batteries. So it's not like it's just box fresh technology that hasn't proven itself. As with a lot of other technologies out there, these things have been around and are proven. So I think from the 5 years I've been doing this, the technology has jumped in a really positive way. So drones have been more efficient and more cost effective to be able to use, but also what you do with what it captures has improved significantly. A lot of the errors when you're dealing with big data have been reduced or disappeared. So it means that it is a very efficient workflow. So my focus is generally capturing land and buildings in 3D, but also doing roof inspections for estates. So traditionally they may have had to use a ladder, or these days it may be a cherry picker, but obviously a cherry picker gets you to the edges of buildings, not in the middle. So it can be a very efficient use. But going beyond just photos, it's actually the data to be able to capture your building in 3D to then again pass it to a platform where you can mark it up, you can annotate it, and you can say, right, there is an issue here, and you can then share it with a contractor or a colleague, so there's no confusion about which chimney stack, which slate. You can be very specific. So all that stuff is proven, it's there, and not as scary as it may have been in the past. So yeah, so it sounds sort of new and shiny, and there's always new elements coming out, but there's a lot of proven examples, again, from the drone side of things. Mm-hmm. There's plenty of vineyards that are doing great work using it because of the high per capita on the land there. They have to work very stringently with it, and some great examples, but we can probably go on to that in a bit. But yeah, it's not quite as new as it may seem, and it's well proven, and plenty of very happy clients.
Yeah, and as I say, just a case of more people need to start, exploring those options. But no, that's great. And I think, Sholto, I don't think we can see, but hopefully we can still hear you.
I hope so. Is the microphone working? Sorry about that.
No, don't worry at all. We can hear you absolutely fine. But yeah, so from your position, why do you feel it is so important at this moment in time for the rural sector to be looking to technology?
There's nothing like a good dose of irony that the technology fails on a subject matter of technology, like my video camera. But no, I mean, I think it's a sort of confluence of different factors. I think there's a bit of a cultural lag in adoption in the rural land management sector. I think the pace of change in technology generally, so forget PropTech, but generally in what is undoubtedly akin to an industrial revolution, has meant that the adoption on the broader platform of society is such that people now are familiar with and rely upon technology in a way that they never have done before. And so that cultural lag has become more obvious in a lot of ways, and where our clients and the broader market and the professions and industries within which we work are used to using fintech in the form of accounting and bookkeeping software, and are used to using Google Maps as they drive around the place to tell them when they're going to arrive. It is an obvious, lag that they don't have similar functionality in determining the information they require for managing different portfolios in their land, and how we're going to start assessing that. So now, because I think the technology is there, it is developed, and it is the right moment for it to be introduced, if not before. should it not have been adopted before? So yeah, I think that probably answers it.
Yeah, no, perfect. And that we'll come back to a couple of those points that all three of you have actually made. And I think the first one, which we'll pick up now, is this discussion of, one of the big benefits is the collation and comparison of detailed data. And I think specifically on that point, I certainly feel that's going to be very important given the changes that are on the horizon for the sector, especially around subsidy. But I say would like to open that up to you to say why is that element of it going to be so vital over the short and medium term kind of future as well as the long term future. And again, I think if I can go to Tim first on this one.
Yeah, well, when it comes to sort of land use and land use planning, you can't really do more than one thing on a bit of land. You can't have a woodland and a house. So you have a very kind of sharp decision point as to how you're going to use those assets. Obviously, we're talking about the land sector, so it's about land. And so I think for me, this is where strategic planning is so critical. And given that a lot of these contracts and ELMs are going to be long term, it's like it's a real point in time to think through the longer term strategy. I think BPS has very much allowed us to guarantee an income, whatever we do to some degree. And I think now it's that time of like, what are we going to do? What's our specific context? What funding opportunities happen to be, available to me? Is there a water company, funding some kind of riverbank restoration, or is there a woodland trust incentivizing, tree planting, and are the beelines incentivizing whatever, pollinating? And so all of these things, they're very context specific. And I think this is why I mentioned at the beginning, like the important thing is to do the baseline, know what you have, understand what your opportunities and constraints are, and then you can start pragmatically planning for the next potentially 30 years. And this, it's a long-term sector. It's something where succession is, the heart of the conversation often. And I think for me, that's why this point in time is so critical to analyze what's being done on land. And, obviously from our perspective, that's exactly why we set up, I was here on our family farm. I was like, what are we going to do? Yeah, who knows? And I couldn't work it out myself. We need to have the data. We need to have the advisors. We need to be working with our farming group, which we are. And I think it's these conversations that everyone needs to be a part of. You need to come to the table with the data at your fingertips, which can be done really easily in today's day and age with the technology and data we have, and start to engage in those conversations. So yeah, hopefully that's something, but yeah, conscious of time and probably best to pass on to others.
No, thank you very much for that, Tim. Sholto, how about your views on this element of it?
Yeah, I mean, probably a similar theme. For me, we are engaged as professional advisors on behalf of our client to give them the tools to make decisions. And that comes in the form of recommendations and drawing on our experience. No decisions can be made by anybody without a basis in facts. And I think if you sort of break it down into the various stages of how you make decisions, which is, one of the pieces of work we are engaged in a lot is creating strategic appraisals on estates. You cannot make decisions without information, and you cannot have information without data. The raw data that Daniel and his team at the Black Arrows put together is then transformed into information by categorizing it into whatever form you need it to be to make it meaningful. Because data on its own is not particularly meaningful. Information is meaningful. And then using that information, you can start to forecast and make decisions. And if you don't have that, it's either in a lesser form, an averaged form or an estimated form, or it's just gut instinct. You are open to be making errors, and those errors over time will grow. And so I think if you're going to keep a close and tight control over decision making and forecasting, you need detailed sets of data. The problem with that is the more data you have, the harder it is to aggregate it, collate it, and make it into meaningful information, because it's just so much is there. And that is why technology is so important, because it does that for you and it strips out human error. And I think, the control of data and understanding data is a fascinating subject in its own right, if you're a little bit geeky, but it is such an important basis for how we manage and make decisions about our land.
Yeah, certainly. No, and that leads us very nicely, actually, like you were saying, that what Daniel does with the raw data collection. And Daniel's very kindly provided us with a video that I will share now. And if Daniel, you'd be kind enough to talk us through just in terms of that data collection element and some of the stuff that hopefully the panelists should be able to see on the screen very shortly.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed here. This. Everyone see that? Hopefully.
Okay. So yeah, great. So yeah, we use a variety of different drone platforms to capture the data here. So when we talk about data in this instance, we're talking about GIS. So XYZ location information, which can allow a 3D model to be created. So it's not just something that operates in a silo, which I think the guys have sort of pointed to. We know all of us know as consumers as well as business people that there's plenty of technologies that sit in a silo and then become useless. So all of what we do is designed to work with existing platforms, whether it be working in Google or working across the guys' platforms here, or with CAD or so forth. So with larger landowners here, the examples, we're capturing, like I say, the 3D data, elevation data, which once you've got, then you can then analyze. So whether it's going to help with planning, like 3D visualization here, or whether it's to help with your estate management and look at how the land falls in an accurate and measurable way, rather than just to sort of having a sense of how things are. One of the key things, as Sholto sort of echoes, is with regards to managing data. So old ways of doing this would be to download it onto your computer, and then you've suddenly got a computer that slows down. The modern way of dealing with data is using an online sort of cloud-based system. So that element is removed, so you can view and access things through your browser. So the example we're seeing here is what's termed as a digital twin, a pretty decent resolution capture of an estate building, which then has gone into an online platform that allows you to annotate and share that. So you've got the benefit of high resolution images, which you can download or share or use in a different way, but also you can navigate around your property. The other big strength, again, as Sholto had flagged early on, is getting that first stage, that audit, getting it done, captured once, allows you then to compare over time. So if you're looking at a building condition in this example, you can do it again at another juncture, whether it's after some work or if it's just on a regular 6 months, a year, 2 years time. You can then compare and contrast. So you actually have a data set that you can start from and give you fact to work back to. Like I mentioned at the outset, we have a variety of different drone platforms. So the one you're seeing here is a fixed wing drone, which is ideally designed for, is ideal for large area capture, as it's a lot more efficient. It's very quiet, doesn't interrupt livestock, normally operates between 80 to 100 meters altitude. But we do have then more sort of, dare I say it, traditional rotor-based drones, which are then more useful if you need to hover, if you need to get over a building or operate in a smaller space. Again, this technology is being applied not just in planning, as the example here, with an architect we've captured the reality of a situation rather than paying someone to create a CGI mock-up of a situation. All the trees are the real trees. The architect is able to then place in a design and see and show the views relative to the actual scenario it's set in. But with regards to estates, okay. With regards to the estates, the main use has been capturing the large areas, ultimately creating an up-to-date map, and also looking at roof conditions and looking at 3D captures of estate buildings. So there's a range of applications there. The other sort of next stage when you're going sort of bigger on data, rather than just capturing in 3D, is then looking at multispectral and near infrared cameras to look at crop analysis, which is then going to the next level. But all these things, again, are established drones and software to process that. So it's not quite as scary as it can be, but certainly you need to look at what you're going to do once you've got that information, rather than sort of just getting excited about having a drone.
No, I have to say, the first time I watched that video, and even now, it's incredible actually. Because I've seen people using drones on estates for inspections and things like that, but actually understanding that the data set that it creates behind it is really impressive. Because I'd never seen, say, that level of modelling and everything that you're able to capture. So that's really interesting, and I'm sure that plenty of farms and estates around the country would be interested in having that baseline of data that is so detailed and intricate. But no, thank you very much for that, Daniel.
Okay.
I think that moves us on nicely into our next question, which also I think which did come up in the discussion previously, and that was, we were talking about these are established technologies, and like you said, they've been around for a long time, but just not necessarily in our sector. And how can we, as the rural sector, learn from these other sectors and adopt these technological changes which have been implemented, and kind of examples of where that they've been beneficial for other areas. Sholto, would you like? We can see you again now, Sholto. Would you like to come in on this one? Oh, I think you're muted, Sholto.
There we are. That's better. Yeah, I apologise. You've now got to look at me as well as listen to me. No, I think, it is a difficult thing to start to know where to plunge into, to technology. I think one of the things we're seeking to do at Searchlight, and I think ditto with the Black Arrows and the Land app, is to really democratize the use of it. And it is incumbent upon us to make that entry to using our technology as open as possible and as simple as possible. I would encourage people to get in contact with Tim and Daniel and myself to discuss that. I think part of the problem, as we've touched on before, is that a lot of the professional services sector can keep within their organizations the technology and never sort of allow the market to engage with it, but do engage with it. It's not actually, it's all designed and led by the market to make that user interface simple. One of the things we've realized onboarding estates onto Searchlight is just how reactive the estates can be to the use of technology. And so quite often the approach is, we need some fintech, let's go and get an accounting program. And we need some PropTech, let's get a Terrier program. And we need a mapping app, let's get a mapping program. And one of the things that we do at Searchlight now for those estates that we onboard onto the PropTech is to offer a free appraisal of all the software they are using to manage their estate to ensure they integrate correctly. Because the one thing I think has been a huge put-off is probably a lack of comprehension about how they can actually use the technology to get the results they need. And there's a lot of people seem to download lots of Excel spreadsheets and then manually try and compile them together to create a report. And actually it takes as much time and effort as anything else. And it's quite frustrating. And realistically, all these technologies are capable of talking and working together. And certainly Tim and I are in discussions about how we can integrate Searchlight and the Land app, and ditto with Daniel, how we can integrate that drone data into Searchlight and the Land app. And they do talk together. So I would really encourage people to just pick up the phone or email us and ask how we can help. That all this stuff is available on demonstration. We'll all come out and sort of bend over backwards to try and demonstrate it to get them on that first rung of the ladder.
Thank you for that, Sholto. And I think that, I say that point that you make, and we've certainly discussed this between us as a group, that idea of collaboration is massively important. The idea that, I say, we're all working together to try and improve the offering to the industry, and I say the information that is available to them. So I think that's really key.
It really is worth mentioning that you don't need to get a technology that is a one-stop shop. The way technologies are built these days allows them to talk to one another much more intuitively than it ever did in the past. So really go to the specialists for this.
Mm-hmm. No, certainly. I think that's definitely a key point to make. Tim, can I bring you in as well, just to say where do you think, to say, we need to learn from other areas and sectors in terms of technological change and adapting to that?
Yeah, I think there's a couple that probably jump out, one of which, Xero, the accountancy software, in a really fascinating way, disrupted in a nice way, I think, the accounting world. And all of a sudden, clients and accountants could work really effectively together. If you're a landowner, you could go, or if you're a business, you could go and find advisors that were accredited and approved by Xero. And all of a sudden, you had a very efficient mechanism of working with that advisor. And then you submit your VAT, all goes straight into HMRC. It's all click of a button. It's all accredited. It's all audited. It's all clean. It's all crisp. And I think, for us, or kind of maybe more on a macro level, I think for Elms to work, for the natural capital market to come into existence, it needs to have that same data streamlining between parties, where landowners and advisors, or maybe multiple advisors, you're going to need your ecologist, you're going to need your land agent, you're going to need all these different people to help design really well considered land schemes. And that they are not going to be able to be, it is unlikely that they will be submitted to funders as PDFs, because funders can't read PDFs. They're not going to spend hundreds of thousands of pounds on employing people to read PDFs. It'll be moved through data in a transferable and analyzable way. So I think that what Xero did, I wish I knew the number for this, is how many millions of pounds they saved HMRC. I think we're going to have the same thing for DEFRA and the RPA with Elms and the corporates. For them to really get the value from investing into nature, they need to put it on their annual report. They need to make it available to their shareholders, to their customers in an intelligible, audited way, again, implying it has to be digital. So I'd say accountancy and that kind of Xero model to HMRC is something that we are definitely going to move into for the rural sector. That's one. And the second thing is we've got Leaf and Waitrose on the Anglian Water webinar series tomorrow. And I think they're very interesting from the perspective of how do you tell your story through the supply chain? If you're Leaf Mark standard, it kind of comes with a bit of a stamp of approval that you are someone to be reckoned with, and there's an audit trail. And I think we're going to start to bring more of that concise auditing into the way that we manage land. And I suspect the likes of Alex Robinson's work on creating essentially an EPC for the natural capital of an estate is likely to come in as well. So we're going to probably see more estates and landowners being somewhat accredited with the quality of their management, and that data flow to the private and public sector, I think, is going to be I think there's no way around it. So I think this transition to data and technology, we're in it already. So yeah, that's what I would say. That's where I think we can learn from.
No, that's really interesting. As I think that level of accountability and everything's going to be very important, especially like you say at that big corporate level, yeah, and where they're looking at their environmental impact and everything else. Daniel, just to pick up your points on this, and we've had some interesting discussions around learning from other sectors, because obviously for you, you've had a slightly less traditional path into the rural sector because you worked in marketing previously and have then obviously started your own business and come into the rural sector that way through the Black Arrows. So it'd just be really interesting to hear what you kind of brought from your marketing experience and as I say in that sector, and how obviously they adopted technology, probably one of the big early adopters of technological systems.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, I worked 15 years in digital media and marketing, and about 6-7 years ago, my previous sort of formal boss was actually Jay-Z of all people. So it is a very different world. But yeah, I think in the world of digital media, we certainly very early on went from this big data acquisition and then, oh, what we're going to do with it to this smart data. And now it's sort of smart 2.0, 3.0 almost, where things are actually autonomous and moving very fast in a way that doesn't need so much human control. So for better or worse, depending on your perspective. But yeah, I think having always worked in technology, you're always very conscious of what the latest thing is, but it's not necessarily the latest thing is always the best. So it's a case of being able to see how things bed in. But like I say, with drone technology, with as Sholto's already mentioned, platforms now, if they want to survive, they are built with an open framework. So again, we're not. You shouldn't find yourself in a situation where it's the emperor's new clothes, where you're buying something glittery and shiny that is not going to work. 12 months down the line. So I think it's been very interesting to keep an eye on where the latest things are coming through. So from where I started with this was working with architects and planners, and still do work on a regular basis, and has now moved into as larger landowners see the benefit of capturing land or digitizing their land ultimately, and having that information. It's moving more in that sense. But yeah, I think there's some great examples out there where, again, drones and technology are being used intelligently rather than just flying around taking pictures. A great example in China has been using drones for crop spraying. Now, in this country, understandably, the regulations haven't quite caught up, and there's a lot of concerns about if you're dropping chemicals and where if there's overspray, as it were, how that will be regulated, what will go on. So that isn't currently legal, but it is something which really technology is there. So it's just a case of a legal change if it's going to go in that direction. But another very relevant example I've seen, which I thought was very interesting, and this is a slightly more cutting edge because it uses AI, is actually using lightweight drones to monitor ultimately livestock numbers. So setting up a range of small drones to capture your livestock visually, and those images are sent to the cloud to then count ultimately and keep a number of. The drones come back, they charge, and these all fly autonomously. So this is an ongoing process, and it just means that if there's a sheep, for example, that's fallen on its side, it's in distress, in trouble. These things can be identified by the software because by the learning through AI. I'm fumbling over my words slightly here. But yeah, so there's some great examples that are there's some very interesting future elements. But again, the mainstay of what we do is very much now and has been used successfully the last couple of years.
Brilliant. And that's very interesting, because that picks up very nicely into the next kind of area we were just going to discuss before hopefully moving on to some questions from the Q&A. And you've obviously spoken about it in your area with the drones just there, Daniel, but it'd be interesting to see what Tim and Sholto can see. And we've kind of spoken about the short and medium term need and benefit of technology with all the changes coming on the horizon, but kind of where can we expect to see further developments in PropTech and thinking much more to the long term? And so Daniel's into that, obviously policy restricts us here, but we're seeing use of drones for a number of agricultural purposes across the world, not necessarily in the UK at the moment, but for you guys, where do you see kind of further developments in PropTech?
I can start. So I mean, it depends how long term you're talking, Tom. I think maybe I will start here. So I think climate change, just going there, is not going to go anywhere until we're sequestering carbon into the land en masse, because we can't really control what's sequestered in the sea. So it's going to have to be on the land. And the only way for the carbon to be sequestered in the land in the quantity that we need is we need mass scale transition of practice. We're going to need to basically look after soil and vegetation and much more effectively. So when we come to long term, I think, and global, I know this is a UK conversation, but global, I really think it's going to be technology that's really going to open people's eyes up to the possibility of investing back into land. What I'm excited about is if that story can be told effectively, not only will that be great for the land manager who has a much more resilient business that's got much more profitability inherently inside it and a much higher value, but also it's going to start to enable us to actually start hitting these climate change objectives that we have as a nation, whether it's the net zero, whether it's biodiversity, whether it's water. The fact that all of the rivers are not in good state is not acceptable. And so it can only be technology that enables people to have the information at their fingertips to cause them to change their behavior. So information is one thing, but also funding, the ESGs, the environmental social governance, that now all of these financial organizations are absolutely bound to. That money is going to float down to the land sector because it's the only way to help them hit their real objectives. So I think we're going to see technology opening the information flows and the financial flows that really enable the whole of the land sector to transition to best practice, creating a much more resilient ecosystem, much more resilient farming commercial structure, and I think a much more direct connection to the consumer who will value what is basically better produce. So that's where I think things are going. It might not be that long term because ESGs are here now, climate change emergency is here now, river, it's all here now. So I think long term is even 5 years because tech moves so quickly. So yeah, that's what I would say is probably what we're going to see.
Okay, no, that's very interesting. Sholto, would you like to come in?
Yeah, I think why technology is important, particularly for rural landowners and for their states, is because we have the opportunity of passing the benefit of that technology, back to the landowners so that they can then use that saving, that money, to reinvest back into the countryside. And this does wed itself very closely to the culture of adoption of technology. I suspect over the next 10 to 20 years, the adoption of technology direct by landowners and by those who manage the land will be much greater. It will drive efficiencies in the property technology that affects the rural economy much quicker. And though there will be a lot in the form of data gathering and information collation, it will all be driven by how that benefit is passed on to the landowner. And at the moment, what is happening is the technology is being contained by the professional services sector and by specialist businesses. And what we will see is that democratization of technology, which will drive it. And that will drive evolution of technology. It'll drive greater efficiencies and resources. And this isn't a sort of an opportunity for a Luddite rebellion. The employment will be there. It'll be just transitioned and re-resourced to different areas to benefit the natural capital of the land and the direction of travel of monetizing and capitalizing some of those elements. So I think that's probably where it will go. And I think as that culture changes, so too will the integration of technology. So I think the technologies won't be lots of different areas. They will be integrated and form a much more cohesive mesh of of tools. It'll be the equivalent in the old days of opening your toolbox and finding lots of different tools and knowing what each of them do, and they all work together. That is what technology will be. It'll be a much more obvious, intuitive toolbox for managing your land efficiently.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. No, I think that's very interesting. And I think there's a lot of points we've made here, and I'm just slightly conscious that I want to move on and pick up some of the Q&A questions and potentially come back to some of the points we've discussed. And we've got two questions that have come in very kindly from Robin Horton. The first one being is that with obviously all the discussion we've had about the different systems and kind of cloud-based storage and things like that, Robin has asked that surely all of this relies on having good broadband connections, and obviously much of the rural community in England is not necessarily well served with this, and how much of a barrier will that be to the adoption of technology and PropTech solutions?
Well, I might start, if I may, only because I am a practicing land agent we do practice what we preach. We set up our business in a mid-Devon rural village just to demonstrate that you can. And my home office has terrible broadband. There are solutions out there, even for the real black spots, which I would encourage people to look into. A lot of these solutions, you're absolutely right, do require broadband use. And for those who are able to relocate or find a solution to their broadband, they should. And by relocate, I mean, look to site yourself or your receiver on a place where even mobile reception is picked up. That's how we run our business, our home office, through mobile reception. And for those who aren't, it is a tougher gig. There are different technologies you can use which are self-contained, require a server in your business, and you can run it through a server. But the connection to the outside world through the cloud and through the internet is such a fundamental underpinning. And there will be a greater divergence of social and professional enterprise as the void between those with the internet and those without. It is a concern.
Mm-hmm. And so surely that's something that should be fed into our argument then around policy and rollout of fast broadband, is that it is a limiting factor. Well, the point is that it is a limiting factor for businesses, and it will only continue to do so as they try and adapt and adopt these technological changes. And Daniel, I just wanted to ask you, because looking at your video and seeing that the data that you capture, for me, someone who's not necessarily as au fait with that kind of stuff, I mean, I would look at that and think that would require a huge amount of cloud storage, and then I say surely broadband, and that would the broadband speed would very much limit your ability to how much data you can transfer between the cloud and your information software package.
Yeah, I guess there's 2 points. There's the bigger infrastructural challenge, and then obviously a per estate or project question. On the bigger picture stuff, again, I live in a very rural hamlet in South Devon. When I moved in here 5 years ago, it was 7 meg. We now have fibre to the door, not through, I haven't had to spend tens of thousands to it. They put the infrastructure in, and I have now 900 meg. So these things are progressing, are happening. And the big, I think probably for rural areas, the biggest impact will be 5G. So I think that I wouldn't be, like today, I'm sure people have plenty of problems, but I wouldn't be too fixated on this is going to be the same forever, because 5G is a huge jump in the bandwidth available, and obviously from an infrastructure point of view, it's a lot easier than laying cable. So whether it's 5G or 6G, but I think for 5G, for most people, it won't actually be an issue for too long. With regards to per project, again, what we do is not always the full solution, but we certainly have worked with clients. I work with actually, I probably shouldn't give any existing agents free advertising, but work with very established land agents, and a lot of the time their clients do have that issue, and we work on a project by project basis, and it may be a case of being able to provide all of that information on a hard drive or on a computer or on a server, as Sholto has highlighted. So obviously the value of being able to connect to the outside world is to be able to exchange information, but sometimes if it's a case of just, depending on how you want to use this, but if it's a case of we want a digital map of our whole estate and we want to be able to digitize in 3D our buildings, then that can be done, and that can be done in a standalone way and updated as you go. So it isn't a case of broadband kills these sort of big leaps in progress. There's certainly ways around it. So yeah, it's certainly not a deal killer, as it were.
Perfect. And Tim, would you like to come in?
Yeah, I think there's probably a couple of things. So one of which is we had to do a presentation a couple of years ago. I think it was 0.2 megabytes of broadband. And it was, anyway, so we walked into this barn to do a presentation, 30 farmers sat in front of us, checked the internet settings and sort of bowed our heads and God. Anyway, the software actually worked fine. Amazing. God knows how, I mean, who knows how it did it, but it was fine. So I think unless you have zero broadband, you're in the game, essentially. And I think it is, I would struggle if my internet was that slow. I wouldn't be a lot of swear words, I'm sure, but the point is, unless you have no broadband, you're in the game. And I think the second thing to add is that what we see with all of our customers, whether estates, whether it's land agents, whether it's facilitation funds, it's all with landowners, a lot of the work is still being done or can be done by advisors, and advisors will have good internet. So it's still, they can work on your behalf, use the technology, which is nearly always collaborative, meaning you get the outputs of their work in digital formats, but they're basically taking up all the, they're using the high-speed internet. So what I'd say is use your facilitator, use your advisor, get them to do the legwork for you and get the output of that digital data that you can use. And as long as you've got some internet, you should be able to interact with it. So I don't think there's many people that are totally cut out from this. Obviously better internet would be better, but I don't think, unless you're totally off grid, I think you're very much inside this ecosystem that we're talking about today.
Mm-hmm. No, that's very interesting. Hopefully that kind of alleviates some of the concerns that Robin had. Robin's actually submitted another question as well, which I think I would like to pick up on, and he's asked how much of the likely ELM funding coming to landowners and managers in monies that will be received will end up being spent on advisors and technology, because he's quite concerned that a lot of landowners and managers are worried that is going to be probably a huge chunk of their ELM subsidy income going out. I'm very happy to pick up. It's a great question. It's such a great question. If you look at it in two ways, if you don't have technology, how much time is it going to take? How many hours, days is it going to take to get the basic information you need? In advisor fees, in complexity and ambiguity, and whereas if you use technology, it's really unbelievably efficient. Not only do you get the data at your fingertips very efficiently, but also the time that you have to engage with your advisor is much smaller, because they're actually able to use that data and add their value services on top, rather than you paying them for all the admin time that basically technology and data can do. So, just from our perspective, the Land App basically is free to enter. So you can come in, you can choose land reg titles, you can do RPA field boundaries, you can get our support all for free. We do have subscription services, of course we do, and we can sell ordnance survey data, but relatively the return on investment is so much bigger using technology and data. So I would just say, what we're endeavoring to do is to make sure as much of that natural capital money or ELMS money ends up actually as features on the ground. Obviously, it's important everyone gets paid to do it as well. So we need technology and tooling to enable the best outcomes to be delivered, which is essentially what we're going to get paid for. And I come back to that Zero model. Having Zero in the mix that allows businesses and accountants to work really efficiently and submit data to government, it streamlines all the processes. It just saves all the costs. So I would say this technology is here to stay, and it's going to make everyone's life so much more efficient, so we can focus on value rather than lost wasted time in administration. So that's kind of my thoughts on it.
Yeah, I would second that, and I'm delighted that question came up, because it was the entire premise for Searchlight being created and Terra Nova. And having worked for over a decade in a conventional business as a land agent, the opportunity to pass the benefit of technology back to the landowner was very obvious, and we've been able to exploit that. And you can bring about very, very material savings to the costs of your advisors by paying them, by which I mean us, he says gratuitously, just for the value of their experience. And as Tim quite rightly pointed out, do not pay your advisors for administration that technology can perform either for free or for cost. It is, and you will end up saving money that way.
I think that's a very valid point, certainly. Daniel, have you got any thoughts you'd like on this one in terms of the worried about costs, and just in terms of, say, maybe setting out what the financial benefit is of having that data and say the data collection that you carry out?
I think Tim and Jolter make a solid point. Those guys are working actively across the states and have worked in the states, so they know the reality on the ground. I think ultimately, a very easy practical example, that I've found working on landed estate buildings has been the cost of a cherry picker is around about, I think, £700 to £800 a day, depending on the size that you go for. It may take you several days. You have to rent as a minimum. Could be getting into the thousands, and you still can't view properly the middle of your building, and you have to move it around and get stuck in mud and so a drone survey of a building like that could be from around about £1,000. Obviously it's subject to if, buts and maybes and what have you, but there's an obvious saving there, and you get a huge amount more for it. So that's a very easy binary example. But again, when you're capturing land, this is obviously a new thing, so it's an additional thing. But to the guy's previous points, is if you've got this information, you've got fact. So rather than either just putting your head in the sand about something or using gut and it being a wrong call, you can make decisions faster, which is saving time, and make ideally the right decisions because you've got fact in front of you, which again is saving everyone time and money. So again, these aren't things that are necessarily frivolities and nice to have. They are things that you can practically and accountably use. And if it's not working for you, we can have discussions and see what better ways to improve. But you'll be able to see what is working and what is not. And I think that's a real value in technology and in accountable, measurable technology.
No, thank you very much for that, Daniel. And I think looking at the time, unfortunately, we are going to have to wrap up. And it has been it's been a pleasure having you three here with me today and having a very interesting discussion. And we will just confirm for everyone on the webinar, we will be sending out a document after this is finished, which will have all of the details for all three of our speakers here today. So if you want to get the ball rolling and get in contact with any of them, then please feel free to following the receipt of that email. But thank you very much, guys.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
No problem at all. Thank you very much to everyone who's attended today. It's been a very interesting discussion around a very exciting area of the industry. And as I said, please don't hesitate to contact me if you've got any questions that maybe didn't get picked up from the Q&A because of the time, and we'll be happy to try and get something out to you by email. Just to flag up that we've got a couple of future CLA events, including we've got an in-conversation with Andy Middleton taking place tomorrow, where Mark Tufnell, our CLA Deputy President, will be discussing with Andy Middleton around strategy and policy innovation, specialising in working with leaders to catalyse radical action in climate, nature and well-being. And we've also got a CLA South West Advisors Hour coming up on the 13th of May, where myself and Claire Wright will be available for an hour to discuss with any of the members here in the Southwest any queries or concerns you've got relating to your rural business and have a bit of a surgery. And I say that you can sign up for free for both of those events. But thank you again, and we hope to see you all at a webinar soon.